I'm here with Gillian and Jordan, two of our pen testers. I was going to come here and talk about red teaming, but I've just learned that there's a difference between red and black teaming. Can you
Yeah.
take me through the difference?
Essentially, for red teams and black teams, especially in bulletproof, we like to distinguish the difference. So, black team we focus on physical assessment. So we're not hacking or pen testing a network or a system. We are hacking and pen testing a site or a physical building. So it's not just the building that's in scope. So we would also kind of include like the staff and the company members as part of that scope. But the like on the contrary, like a red team would focus on the networks and the actual systems that they have in scope. So you can blend them together. So you can do what's called like a simulated attack, where you have components from a black team and a red team in scope. So as an example, you could use a red team to gain access to an organization's networks and potentially modify security camera footage or open doors for the black team to then go into the building. So those are like the best case scenarios. We have OSINTs as well, so open source intelligent stages, where we look at the kind of like information that's available online through kind of like public repositories and websites, and essentially that helps us with the research for a lot of these engagements, especially with the black team side of things, because the staff are also in scope. We need to understand our targets. We've recently launched like our last black team that we did. We incorporated some phishing elements to it. We found that having access to staff's phone numbers and being able to send like phishing emails at the same time, we were able to kind of reproduce like a really convincing requirement for us to be on site. So because we'd already figured out a way to enter the site, we kind of had that level of trust there. So being able to phone up employees of that site and say, if it was a random case of somebody wanted to access your laptop to ensure that it was compliant and you were from the IT team, you'd be really suspicious. But because I was able to phone them up and say, I'm on site on this day, can I come to your desk and we can do this? That implies like a higher level of trust. Like they're going to assume that you're meant to be there, or somebody's let you into the building at that stage. If you're able to walk to the desk, the likelihood is that they're going to give you the laptop. But that's ultimately like how there is a difference between black team, red team, OSINT, and phishing. They can all work together if you did like a simulated attack. But if customers come to us and say, we just want to focus on our physical buildings, we would do a black team and some OSINT. Have they said that we're not really too bothered about our buildings? We just want to focus to see how well our like intrusion detection systems are doing, how well our SOCs, like how capable our SOC is, how secure we are externally. That's then when a red team would focus, because we're not just focused on getting a foothold. We're trying to get a foothold without being detected. Because ultimately we're trying to simulate like a real world attack team at that stage. And then phishing again helps with both scenarios.
So is that the difference then between taking it the other way, a red team and a penetration test? Is that you're simulating an attack with a red team, whereas a penetration test, you're just trying to enumerate everything?
I reckon with the pen test, it's just way more narrowly defined. Usually with a pen test, you say, oh, you're only attacking a web application, only attacking an internet infrastructure or something. But with a red team, it's more almost all bets are off. You can't go impersonate a police officer because that's actually illegal. But you can just, as Jordan said, phone people up, send them a phishing email, try to break in, plug into the network, see what can we see from the network. So it's broader. And usually when we get red teams signed, it's people that say, do whatever you want. I just want to see how far you can get, what information you can get from it.
So what do you enjoy most, red teaming or black teaming?
Well, they're tied together because, as Jordan said, a black team is part of the red team. I personally, I quite like phishing just because I quite like, maybe it's a nerve thing, but it just feels more, you're a bit farther removed from it. You just send that email, you see credentials coming and things.
I love the initial step of gaining access into the building. So sometimes it's really difficult and we get a little bit stumped. Sometimes it's super easy. The last engagement we did, we tried really hard to get caught, and we still didn't manage it. But I like the idea of creating the illusion or bypassing reception, tailgating in, basically gaining the initial foothold is what I enjoyed doing the most. Gillian, as you said, you prefer once you're in the building, working your way around. So usually we do assessments together, which is why that we make a pretty good team on that front.
What's the hardest part, would you say, of a black team engagement?
It depends on the assignment, right? Because we've had some where we walk around and we see 3 security guards and turnstiles and no back entrances, and we found the back entrance, and then we looked at it for like 2 seconds, and then a guard showed up and asked, "Hey, what are you doing here?" So we were already like, "Oh, okay." So it really depends, because sometimes they'll have really, really good protection systems against phishing and so on. Sometimes people will be quite well trained. You phone them up and they're immediately suspicious, but then you can just walk in. And sometimes it's a complete other way around. A phishing email just goes through, you bring someone up, they're happy to meet you, give you their password, their social security number, and so on. Not that that's the thing in the UK, but then walking in will be really difficult. So it depends assignment to assignment, really.
I think having that like fake level of confidence is really hard to kind of do, because when we're planning an assessment, we have to create, like, in our mindset, a number of stories that we're going to use on the day to get past reception or to get through doors or to tell security guards. One thing that's really difficult is to, in our heads, think, okay, but if they come back with this question, what are we going to say? What's believable? What do we have on us that could like help with that illusion of trust? And if you get to reception and you look really nervous, you look like you're not supposed to be there, or if you go up to a tailgating door, you look like you're not supposed to be there, people notice straight away. If you have that fake level of confidence and you're like, I come here every day, I'm meant to be here, people don't tend to question you as much. But I guess another one of the hardest things is if you gain an like initial entry to the building, even as simple as looking like you know where you're going is really difficult, because ultimately you need to get to point B, but you don't know where point B is. The last assessment we did, as soon as you walked in, they had a massive touchscreen with every floor, and it had a floor plan of every single floor and where each room was. That was perfect, because Gillian went in first and took pictures of each floor, and I hadn't been in yet, so I could study each one before we went in. So even though I hadn't been in the building, when I went to each floor, I'd memorized the floor plans of each floor, so I knew where I was going. And because I knew where I was going, I didn't look suspicious. But it is really hard to kind of maintain that kind of like fake level of confidence in the fact you're supposed to be there.
But sometimes it's very much as you say, if you're able to do it, it just works even if you're wrong. Because we've had an assessment where I walked into the building, I went into a meeting room to try and see if I could plug in, because usually that has like Ethernet ports and stuff. And someone came in and they said, "Where are you from?" or "Who are you from?" And I just gave a name. And apparently this wasn't even the full office we were supposed to go to. And the name I gave made no sense to the people that I said it to, but they were like, "Oh, okay." And they just left and let me be on my way.
Nice.
Yeah.
What do you think companies get out of red teaming from your tester's point of view? What would you say a company gets out of it?
I think they get quite a lot. I know this is, well, very much tooting their own horn, but I think our reports are really good. They're very detailed. But aside from that, I actually on scoping calls quite often get a remark saying, "Yeah, but why do we need to do internal tests? Because someone would need to break into our building, and who's going to do that, right?" But if you can prove to people that it is possible to do that, and prove to them that it is needed to, even if someone breaks in, because we've had really good examples as well where we managed to get in, we tried to plug in and nothing happens. And that is because they've already taken into account what if someone breaks in, we'll check what is the make of their laptop, what is the MAC address they've got, and so on. And I think that is definitely something that they get out of it. And then we look at it from a very holistic view as well. And we don't just say, "Oh, you need to fix just this one thing." We go at it in layers. Are your people being educated? Do you have that extra layer if someone breaks in, that is protected as well? And then only then you'll be looking at the internal infrastructure. How is that set up? So I think it provides a really nice holistic view, and it can very much kind of pinpoint issues that need to be addressed as well.
Nice.
Yeah, I think that kind of like expanding on that, like I've worked like for or in some pretty large banks, and ultimately what they do when we raise a lot of issues is they will often reduce the severity if it's only available internally. So say we find SQL injection, which is a really big issue. If it was unauthenticated, for example, they would reduce the risk rating of that issue quite significantly if it was only available externally. But us being able to do like a black team assessment and bridge that gap to say, you know, this is how easy it would be to break in, then everything else suddenly has like more context. Like sometimes it's better to work backwards. If you do an internal infrastructure and you say, these are all the things that are wrong in the network, and then that when we do a black team assessment, we could say, and here's how easy it would be an attacker to break in and then have access to all those. Like what we do is basically like provide a bridge. And for like a CISO, for example, it basically gives them like a lay of the land to say, this is actually how easy or hard it would be for an attacker to do X, Y, or Z. But for red teams themselves, like the more like technical side, organizations don't really get a chance to properly test their SOCs or their intrusion detection systems. They do against like scans and random attacks that are on the internet, but it's very rare that you can say that they've been targeted by like trained professionals and their systems were able to detect X, Y, and Z. Quite often, like random attacks on the internet are really loud scans that are pretty easy to detect, but the scans that we would do as part of a red team are slightly harder. So it's good for a company to know that actually if a hack team were to target us, then we would pick that up.
And is that when purple teaming can come into play?
Yeah, I'd say so. If they want to have that collaboration between, because we've had it very much depends how companies want to approach it, right? But sometimes they will like to have that direct contact. Or one of the tests we did, they wanted to have their blue teams or their defensive team be aware of what we were doing only after they've realized we were doing something. So we just did it in stages. We first tried to be really quiet, not show anything, and then upped it a little bit. And then at one point we just kind of as Jordan said, just threw a lot at the network. And then suddenly we started getting emails and started seeing weird faces. And then it became a collaboration where, as you said, would become purple teaming, where we would say, okay, we've done this, did you pick it up? We've done that, did you pick it up? So yeah.
So when would you advise a business to start red teaming or to start black teaming? Let's say someone's on board with pen testing, they know its value, they do it, say, once a year. What's the point where they need to say, okay, maybe I now need to look at a red team or a black team even?
So if we break those up, when they would start doing a black team is if you have an organization that's very remote based, like they have very few sites, and sites they do have aren't really connected to their internal network. It's literally just like a shared office with access to Wi-Fi. There might not be a huge amount of value that you can get from a black team, because like a lot of your company resources might not be on site, might not be very fruition for an attacker if they were to break in. But if your organization has at least one site where there's a lot of potentially sensitive data that's either on the network or stored in files, or there are, server rooms, as soon as you have like at least one or two sites, that's when black teams can become super beneficial. If you have a lot of sites, then obviously it's going to be more beneficial because the attack surface for an attacker, like a physical attacker, is much bigger. Because the security controls on all the sites would largely be like potentially pretty similar, some companies may only choose to do like a selected approach where, they would say like we have 5 customer support centers and they all are roughly the same. So we would test, 1 or 2, and hopefully the recommendations that we raise would be applied to the other 3 or 4 that are in scope 2. For red team, it's slightly different, because it focuses on like the technical aspects. So a red team is important, but when it would differ between like a standard pen test is when you have security controls in place. Like if you have a mature SOC and you have security controls in place and you want to understand like the full attack path. So when, as Gillian said before, when you do a pen test, it's quite a narrow scope. You would basically focus on one part. But if you want an idea of how like whether an attacker would be able to get from outside the company, like on the internet, to 3 or 4 internal networks in, that like a red team is probably going to give you that value or that knowledge. And if you have like security controls in place or a SOC, you can then review their effectiveness as well with a red team.
One last thing to finish up with. What's the coolest thing you've done as part of a red or black team exercise?
I think, well, without naming any names, the first one that we did together, I think was really cool, just because it looked a bit hopeless from the start. It's the one that I mentioned already, where we were there the day before, we had a look around, we saw there were turnstiles everywhere, there was guards posted in front of turnstiles, there was we went around the back looking for side entrances, and then we got immediately caught. Well, not caught, but someone walked up to us and asked what we were doing there. So to me, I immediately thought this isn't going to work. Of course, we were definitely going to try, and if we get, if our cover gets blown, so be it. We then we went to a parcel shop, got a little parcel ticket made, tried to get in that way. They stopped me. They took my parcel, and it was someone got an empty parcel that day. So they believed me. They believed I was a parcel collector, which, on another note, I went in without my glasses with my hair tied back to not look recognizable. But then I didn't realize I can't see very well without my glasses. But in any case, we did all of that. They just took the parcel. They said, "Thank you, we'll deliver it. This is where you stop." And then I remember Jordan also came up with the idea of, well, what we then saw was that there was a box filled with lanyards and with key cards on top of the receptionist desk. And we saw the day before that someone put like visitors at the end of the day, they would put that in that box. So we thought that's something really interesting, because maybe they don't get disabled and maybe we can try and steal one. Jordan had the idea first to pretend to be drunk and knock it over, and then I pick one up, which we didn't go for, but that would have been really funny. What we did instead is Jordan went in, I was around the corner. We were talking about how to install Windows, because he was pretending to be like an engineer for laptops or something. And the moment the receptionist looked away for a second, he grabbed one and he went back outside, gave it to me. I went in, I tried to beep it. Apparently I was at the wrong turnstile, and someone came to me and said, "Yeah, that's not going to work because you're trying to head to the other office." I'm like, "Oh yeah, sorry, I'm visiting here first time." So I go to the next one, it also doesn't work. So then I go to reception and I said, "Hey, you just gave me a pass, it's not working." And they said, "Oh, so sorry," and gave me a new one that is working. And that's how we got in. So I think that is one. It took us a little bit, but at the end we got in, and I think that was a really cool one to do.
Jordan, any different things that you've done you think, "Gee, that was really cool what I did"?
So mine was actually based on that one too, because there was quite a lot of like moving parts to that one. So like when we stole a badge from the box, for example, like it wasn't as simple as stealing a badge, because there were so many cameras and security guards all looking at this box. It's like, how do you steal something in plain sight? So the initial like idea that we had was to knock it over, and obviously when we're helping put it back in, then keep one. I raised a suspicion though, so Gillian made us some fake badges that day of a company that was not our target, but they were in like a shared building. So the company that we were actually targeting were much better. Like we didn't know what their badges looked like until the day, so it's much harder for us to make like a fake badge. So when I went in talking to Gillian, I wore my fake badge, so everyone, like I walked in blatantly, so I made sure everyone saw me, and I went and talked under the stairs for a good 5 or 10 minutes, so that everyone kind of forgot that I existed. So then when I saw a big group of people leaving for lunch, my plan was to take my badge and put it in the box so it looks like I was a visitor. And then when I walk away, I think, "Oh no, I've forgotten my bag or my laptop charger," and then run in. And when I go to get my badge, I'll take a different one. So that was my plan, but that didn't. It actually ended up much better, because when I put my badge in the box, the receptionist, for whatever reason, turned around to sort some paperwork, and the security guard was behind me, so my body was blocking it. So I just swapped in the box and then gave it to Gillian, and then we could go in there. Ultimately, for like a lot of the cool issues that we see, like to gain access to a building, unfortunately, quite a lot of times it's very easy. So we've only had 1 or 2 assessments where it's been pretty difficult to break in. Like ironically, some of the hardest ones to do are small offices. So the very first engagement I ever worked on was a small office. So I sat in my car, like in the car park just in front of the doors, and I had to watch. Like I knew how many seconds it took for me to walk from my car to the doors. So I'd be behind somebody to walk in, but I needed to wait to see somebody that had the right color of badge on before they walked in. So I knew that they would go to the right office, because it's all well and good getting in the first doors, but you need to get to the actual floor. So it's not best practice to tailgate the same person twice, because they get really suspicious. But this was the last person. Like everyone arrived much sooner than I did. So I went in, tailgated the first person, tailgated the second person. But when I got in the target office, there were only like 15 people in that whole office, and they all knew I wasn't supposed to be there. So for my first assessment, it was pretty difficult to come up with a convincing story. And that's been the only one where I've been caught, because it was so small. And for that office, there was only one reason that visitors ever come. But on the same vein, like their other office, we managed to break in, which was Gilling's Inn.
Forgot to mention as well that on the assessment that we did with the stealing of the badge, that you got the police called on you as well. They
did, because the badge that we'd created had our actual names, because we haven't made like fake IDs to go with whatever name we put on our card. So because I needed to use my real name and I swapped the card from the box, they realized when they emptied the badges at the end of the day that my badge was wrong, like it was iffy. And because I had my name on it, they then thought, oh no, something's up. So they phoned the police on that day. But we managed to catch it before they came.
Brilliant. That's amazing. Thank you to both of you. I know you are mega busy. I really appreciate this.
Amazing.
No worries. Happy to help.